We are live.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll call this meeting of the School Capital Fund Commission to order on Monday, September the 11th at 3 p.m. And are there any questions about the agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So
Okay. Moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We will follow the agenda. Thank you very much. And let's see, I think we do have some new folks in the room. So actually it would probably be, I know we have a new superintendent, very important. Great to have you here with us, Dr. Fairman. I guess we should go ahead and start and just let everybody, because there's a few other folks as well. So would you like to begin?
Sure. Hi, my name is Rocio Quintero. I'm with the Communications and Public Engagement team here at Buncombe County.
Thank you.
I'm Tim Holcomb, National City Schools. Been around this team for a few years now.
Ronnie Lunsford, Buncombe County.
Tim Shelton, Asheville City Schools.
Georgia Harvey, Asheville City Schools.
Maggie Furman, Asheville City Schools.
Burton Doss, Asheville City Schools.
George Seabird, Commission member.
Terry Wells, Buncombe County Commissioner.
Amanda Edwards, Buncombe County Commissioner.
Amanda Simpkins, Commission member.
Mason Scott, Buncombe County Finance.
Michael Fruit, Buncombe County.
Paige Anderson, Buncombe County Financial Analyst.
Matt Evans, Buncombe County Finance.
Tim Fairley, Buncombe County Schools Facilities. Mark Wyatt, Buncombe County Schools Maintenance Director.
Joe Huff, Buncombe County Schools Assistant Superintendent.
Hi, Rob Jackson, Superintendent, Buncombe County Schools.
Robert Frisbee, Director of Technology Services for Buncombe County Schools.
Tina Ford, Buncombe County Schools CFO. Tina Jones, Buncombe County Schools AFO.
Jerry Robertson, Chief Operations Network Security Officer and Assistant Director of Technology, Buncombe County Schools.
All right. Thank you all very much. And let's see, we have our minutes from July 10th meeting. Are there any questions there in those minutes? And if you've had a chance to look over them, I have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in this motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. And now we come to public comment. Do we have anyone here probably for public comment? And are we not doing online public comment, are we? Okay. All right, thank you very much. Then it is time for our financial update.
So the bulk of the meeting today will be coming from the school system, so we do want to just touch base at every meeting about where we are financially. What we will do at the October meeting is a more in-depth financial discussion, talk about some economic stuff, where we are, where we think we could be. But for now, you have some information in your packet, commission members. So what we have on this slide for those new in the rooms, we do have some considerations when we do these public school capital projects. We look for $100,000 or more. There are certain criteria that must be met. They're there on the screen. And then we also consider some things like the funding available, where we are in the economy, or better yet, where we think we're going to be in the economy once we get going here. And then, as you'll hear today, the scheduling and timing of projects really drives the conversation because it's real work, right? So the recent funding history, you can see that we have allocated quite a bit of funding over the past few years. With last year being $31.2 million in funding. Article 39 sales tax is the main revenue source, the only revenue source really, if you take out investment earnings, which is a lot, that funds these projects. So we are keeping a close eye on Article 39 sales tax. And as you've probably read or heard from folks, depending on which economist you ask, things are down a little bit, but we still have growth. We had projected roughly 5 to 6% for Article 39 and FY23, which is where we're in the process of closing out. We did get the last month's number, and we ended up right under 6% sales tax growth. So what does that mean? It means we may be down, but we're still growing. Growth may just not be as great as it was before, and that's okay. And as we'll discuss more next next meeting, we keep hearing these things about recessions and soft landings. And if you ask an economist, it's like a game that I play personally. Every one of them that I know that I get a chance to ask, I try to see if they'll all say the same thing, and they never do. So for now, all we need to be concerned about is sales tax is still growing. We haven't hit, we haven't gone down yet.
Sorry to interrupt you. Do you have a sense, just thinking about what I'm hearing locally around lower tourism, et cetera, like how much of our sales tax revenue is via tourism or local? Do you have a sense of that?
So what we have, George, I'll pull this number for next time. We have it's basically the state level of tourists, like the state tourism board or authority or whatever they are. They run economics on that, and they extrapolate what they believe to be sales tax revenues from tourism. I take that with a grain of salt. Sure. Because we really ever know,
Yeah.
but we can run with it. And then what gets weirder for us is the thing about sales tax is every time we go to the store and we spend $1.07 of sales tax is what we're assessed, right? So 2.25 of that goes to the state. I'm sorry, 2.75 of that goes to the state, and we keep the other 2.25. So what we're concerned with is half of 1 cent, which is super strange. And what the tourism, I'm tying this together, I promise. What the tourism folks don't tell you is there are machines at the state level that chew the sales tax up and then redistribute it out. Article 39 is probably the most pure sales tax that we get. So if we can't extrapolate something from the state tourism folks, we could probably say that's the case for Article 39. But there's other, you may hear of 40 and 42, they go for school projects as well. It's not the same case because they're not pure sales tax, they get reallocated. So I'll have those numbers for next week.
Can you remind me, whenever we were looking at like our predictions, what percent change were we using a conservative percent change? What were we using?
So we're always going to try to use a conservative change. I think we were using, when we do the big cash flows, we usually do 2 to 3%,
Okay.
but we were projecting around 5%.
And so, I mean, it just appears to me like the COVID years were just like the anomaly years. People were cruising, people were doing those things. So we probably, it's not necessarily that tourism is down, it's just that people are traveling like they used to.
Yeah. And another factor to consider, y'all, is nonprofits can request refunds for sales tax. So back when we had Mission was a heavy player in these refunds. Nonprofits have up to 3 years to request sales tax refunds. They typically always wait to a certain point in the year and then they do it. So that's another thing that kind of muddies the water a little bit. I'll pull those numbers too for the next meeting. I don't think they impacted as much as they have in the past, but the COVID years were something else. It's interesting, right? It was definitely an interesting case study on economic activity. So the main expenditures outside of, so how this fund really works, and we'll illustrate this next meeting, is we have money coming in, which is the Article 39 sales tax, with money going out, which after debt service, after debt proceeds, it's debt service. So what we're concerned about is the Article 39 coming in and us being able to pay for debt service, because all the projects that we have currently, we've been funding with debt. So we're worried about the debt service. We've got some numbers on the screen and in your slides. Debt service by nature goes down, right? So it's level principal payments, and what makes it go down is the interest payments decrease over time. So we factor that in whenever Paige and I are going to be running the numbers, and we're going to say, this is where we think we can land. What we're really saying is this is how much debt we think we can afford over a certain amount of time, given certain interest rates. And interest rates is a fun conversation, right? As far as projects goes, we have quite a few projects that are live, 56 existing projects. About 19 of them are over 75% complete, 22% or less. And then we have about $54.3 million in projects that you all have approved that we haven't issued debt for. And no concern there. Mason and I, we usually work on Mason and I handle the debt for the county. We typically try to go to the bond market every 2 years unless something wild is happening, either really good or really bad. Whatcom County government, just so everybody knows, we have a really good, strong credit rating from both the credit rating agencies that we have, and it helps us get attractive debt. Meaning, if you hear folks say cheap debt, we usually get cheap debt. I think the last issuance was 2.93%, which isn't bad. That adds up, of course, over $54 million. But
When was that the last issuance? We got the 2.9.
22.
Okay.
And that was it was an interesting one because we went with a direct placement with a bank. So a bank bought the debt, but
So the plan is to, in 24, be next.
Absolutely. Any more thoughts on that? Interest rates or debt service?
And I'm guessing, do you have any sense of what you think as far as interest rates that you're going to be able to get? Do you have a feel on that, or you don't want to speculate at this point?
No, it's interesting. So we have mortgage rates, which everybody talks about. And then that's how the Fed tries to keep everybody at bay, right? And then we're concerned about investments and we're concerned about debt in our line of work. So our investments, theoretically, they somewhat track with the mortgage rate, right? But the bond market is a little bit more funkier because there's more players in it, right? Players being, or maybe I should say, more variables involved. 4.5%, 5%. That's what we're going to build our cash flow out at. So like when we do any sort of forecasting for you all to make a decision, we're going to go a little bit more conservative, and probably say 5%. And that's it for financials, unless anyone else has more conversation to have.
Any other questions about the financials now? And I believe Asheville City Schools is up first.
It is to your left. But
Are you sure?
I'm sure it's.
You don't want to mess it up regardless.
I got you back.
Right. All right, again, my name's Ronnie Lunsford. I think most people in here probably know who I am. Quick background as to why it says county staff, but I'm talking about Asheville City Schools. Just help these folks out with all of these school capital fund commission projects. So that's the quick end of it. See, look, I told you I'd mess this up. There we go. All right, so real quick, what I'll be talking about today is we're going to do a quick project update on the Asheville High School track. Since we talked about it at the last meeting, I think I gave an update there. And we had a few little issues, but just want to go through that. And then we'll get into our new project request. See another track at the middle school coming up, some renovations over at Hall Fletcher Elementary. And then I'll be glad to take any questions that folks might have. So it's really hard on an iPhone and for a photographer who has no idea what he's doing, but that's a quick overview. It looks much better, I promise, when it's not on a big screen. The track is complete. I'll say 99% complete. There's still a few little things that we need to do, just cleaning things up around it. The lanes are regulation size lanes now, so meets will be legit that are held there. And I'm not even going to pretend like I know what all of those little marks are because I have no idea, but I'm told they are correct. Again, we were able to use a different color for the exchange zones on the track for like where the relay handoffs are. I'm told again by the professionals that makes it easier for not only the athletes to learn where those exchange zones are, but for the judges to be able to tell that they happen at the right spot. So that was one kind of big detail on that we're glad to be able to get in with the budget we had. We did carry the school branding into the D zones with the giant cougar paw on both ends. It's the same logo that was used on the center of the football field, so it just kind of brings that throughout the whole thing. And with that, we'll show a picture of what one is not supposed to look like. Over at Asheville Middle School, I think when that facility was constructed, the track was just put in basic asphalt. And as you kind of can see in those pictures, it's got a lot of cracks. Striping is pretty much gone, with grass growing up through the middle. And on that right-hand picture, you can see inside the D zone area where your field events would be is just grass and really not usable for that. So we've looked to basically copy what's at the high school. So those athletes going from middle school to the high school, the transition between the two is seamless because they've got the same facility. More just visible cracks, and then because it's not in good shape, you can kind of see there's two cars parked there. We will have to eliminate that once the track is done, but there is a nice gate and everything there already, so that'll kind of help make that possible. So then here are the numbers. We had the initial estimate for that track in 2021. We threw a construction escalation of 6% per year, which drives me crazy because it's really low sometimes, as we saw in 2021 and 22. And then design and geotechnical fees for a total project cost of just over 2.4 million. And then we'll move over to Hall Fletcher Elementary School. Really got a packaged renovation that hits a few aspects of that school. The main portion of that renovation would be HVAC and mechanical. Again, on the pictures on the screen, it's kind of hard to tell, but in person, that equipment is in dire need of replacement. The one on the left, you can see where some leaks have occurred and caused damage on the equipment. A lot of the piping has been damaged. We also have pneumatic controls in there, which are really expensive to operate when you're running an air compressor. I think compressed air is one of the most expensive commodities you can do inside a facility. And so we would look to swap those out to electronic VDC controls also. Just makes everything more energy efficient and makes it operate better and less of a headache for these guys. Again, more photos of just mechanical. You can see where a lot of the insulation is missing, which also leads to just inefficiencies in the systems. And then the picture on the left, it's kind of dark, but there's two giant old gate valves up there that are probably inoperable just due to the age, and it makes it hard to isolate portions of the school. So when you have an emergency, say a leak over there, hard to isolate that section to get it repaired. So we just need to really get all of that piping changed out, new valves, correct all the leaks, insulation problems. Get more photos of missing insulation and where leaks have occurred.
Air release is not working
properly. Yep. Another portion of that renovation would be kitchen renovation. So there are broken floor tiles. Again, really hard. It looks much better on my computer. Apologize, but there's broken floor tiles throughout the space that just make cleanings more difficult. Wheeling carts, that sort of thing is just hard to do. And there's, kind of see it in the left picture, some exposed piping that's run along the floor where equipment has just been added, and so we'd look to relocate that just to make it safer, less hazards for staff, and less opportunity for damage if that were to get hit and we get a big water leak, flood in the facility. It's not ideal. It's typical when the kitchen's operating, school's in, and then we don't. And then another phase of that would be an elevator upfit. I think that elevator is like a 1950 something model, and the cab definitely needs a modernization. Interior finishes are damaged, just dated, and it is very small. And there you can see the hydraulic equipment that is extremely old, and I wish I could remember the manufacturer that's on that, but it's one I've never even heard of. So that also includes a window replacement, but I didn't bore you with just pictures of storefront windows. But our initial estimate in 2021 for all of those items was $5.5 million. Did again use that 6% escalation, and threw in design fees, 10% of the project roughly, for a total project cost of $6.8 million. And one thing as we go to the question screen that I forgot to add because it becomes the customary is the $110,000 security allowance that's put in every year. I totally just blanked out on that, but I should have had a slide about that as well. So with that, I'll be glad to take any questions.
So, yeah, go ahead.
So Ronnie, I think what you mentioned, we saw the 6% first. If we're not sure that's a viable number, why not use a different percentage?
Because I'm not sure what to use, to be honest, because it's been so crazy, and I'm sure that Tim probably knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, you're really just rolling the dice anyhow. And I would much rather come back at, 4 months from now and say, hey, look, we messed up. That should have been 10. Here's what our new numbers are, than to be over and then have too much money at the end and make y'all's decision harder as you sit here and go, man, that's a lot of money.
Because at what point, remind me from last year, at what point do we lock that in and you you've got to be at that level, like you,
At bid date.
at bid.
Yeah, but we typically ask, what we do from our design team is we'll ask for some cost estimates along the way to where we can get a better idea. So it's not a hard number like it is at bid date, but we get a general idea by the time we get to bid how close we are.
So you're saying we need to add that 110,000 to your total project
Yes.
cost for security?
Yeah, it's like a separate project.
Okay. And on the Hall Fletcher, the HVAC, so is the system over there, is it all electric or what's?
It's a natural gas chilling water.
Gas.
Yeah, and the chill water.
And then does this include changing out the natural gas or is this just?
So,
Upgrading what's there,
yeah, it's basically an upgrade.
just getting everything up, it's 20 and 30 years old. I mean, we've done little bits and pieces over the last few years with chiller and some fan coil units. But it needs it, the whole thing needs it really, so we can just move on.
So not completely replace it, but upgrade it.
That's correct.
And then how's everything going with Lucy Herring? Because I know we were doing a lot of work over there.
We actually had a pre-bid meeting last week, Friday, last week, yeah, over there. So in the bid date on it is September 15th, I believe, no, 25th.
25th, yeah.
25th, I think. So we'll have hard numbers on that in a couple of weeks. And then the plan is to move forward with the roof portion as soon as we can get materials, and then the bulk of the work will take place in the summer. We'll get started in the summertime.
And some of that work, if I'm remembering correctly, was around the HVAC and everything.
Yes.
A lot of it, yeah.
Yes, it's a complete changeout because they have a two-pipe system now, so they have to switch from heat to cooling and back to heat. And go back with four-pipe where you could, it's a seamless transition between the two seasons. You can actually go from heat to cool same day if you need to.
So the Hall Fletcher one's not going to be quite as intense. What has to be done with the Lucy Herring?
Because it's already full.
No, but it's a mixture of fan coil units and ducted fan coil units and large air handlers. So some of those air handlers they're like built into the rooms. You'll have to cut them out of there and rebuild them in mechanical rooms. It's just, it's a big job also. No doubt
It's very
about it.
simple.
It's similar, that's for sure.
Any other questions for Asheville City Schools?
So I did review the secondary priority request, and I'm clearly a child of the 80s, so you see the word asbestos on something, and it does give you pause. So help me understand how an asbestos removal project isn't considered in this as a safety and health concern.
Yep, I'll let Tim speak to that because that was one that we had for this year. We moved it out because the school is actually looking for some grant money to.
There's some funding out there we applied for.
Just for your reference, I looked to know which ones met all four criteria, and this was one that rose to the top for me, so can you explain?
But there is some funding out there that we've applied for and some federal grants that we just, now the application process just started. And we have applied for that. So we're hoping to get that money to do that work with and not have to use the commission money. I think this goes through 28 until the money's gone. I think there's quite a bit there, so.
And we just had a remediation project you finished this summer also.
Yeah, we
do a lot
just-
of that on our own.
Yeah, we've done a couple $1,000s worth and we applied for that money to be reimbursed just last week.
A caveat, my daughter ran track at Ashland Middle High. Well, not there because she couldn't, but, so this does come, keeping that in mind. But I'm just curious, thinking about the Ashland Middle track, I mean, just an Ashland High, do the Buncombe County school, feeder schools, middle schools, or intermediate schools, do they all have tracks that feed into the, there's one?
One school has an asphalt track, King Creek.
King Creek. Oh, yeah, that's right. They actually they still run there. At least when my daughter was on track, they ran there. Okay. And then the other question about the track, and this, again, this might not necessarily be a commission question, but it is something that has been brought to my attention. It used to be at Asheville Middle, that track and that field used to be open to the public, right? And so just thinking about as we're putting money into these projects, knowing how careful we now have to be with, especially like the high school field. It's the same at the county schools as well. And thinking about where Asheville Middle sits in that community. There might not even be a question behind this, but once you've done all that kind of work, we've got the new field now, putting in a new track, will there ever be an opportunity for the community to use these facilities in the way that they used to be able to?
There is an application process. They can apply, but they won't have an event. But we have closed those facilities off for security and safety reasons. But there is an application if they want to use it for a tournament they put together, something like that, a football tournament or soccer, whatever, they can apply to use that.
Then Parks still uses Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec does still use it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you all very much, and moving on to Buncombe County.
Thank you, commission members. We certainly want to start by saying thank you for the opportunity to provide you an update and then share with you our 2024 request. We are very grateful for the opportunity provided to us. So this time I'll recognize Mr. Huff, our Assistant Superintendent, to get started.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. First of all, I just want to say thank you to the commissioners for doing this. It's always fascinated me. I was a history teacher way back when, before moving into administration. And if I asked the commissioner or anyone in the room to correct me if I get it wrong, but this was partly established because bad publicity that turned into a good thing. Way back when, I think it was late 80s or early 90s, some educational trade magazine came out saying that Buncombe County, Asheville City were a part of the dilapidated dozen. Is that not correct?
You got it. You know it all.
Well, like I said, it's bad publicity sometimes can turn into a good thing. And I think Martin Nesbitt, along with you as commissioner, said, well, that's not going to be so. And therefore, Article 39, I think, came into existence. So I just want to say thank you for continuing this and your commitment. Really appreciate it. Also, historically, a couple of years ago, let's see if I get my math right, about 6, it's basically how time flies. We asked on behalf of ourselves and Asheville City to specifically look at our schools from a security standpoint, and you gave us $400,000 for systems. We worked together, and it was a great partnership with Asheville City. We were able to accomplish a lot of things, have an outside contract come in, and I will tell you, outside some infrastructure things that you're hearing from us, there's a lot of stuff in what we call the implementation phase of what you did then. And I want to kind of say that up front because you're going to see that in a lot of the slides here, and I don't want to give away, so let me get going. Does it take it? Oh, right click. There we go. I think Buncombe County is about the 15th largest out of the 115 LEAs. So I will tell you, I'm going to rely on a lot of help for this. When you're that big a system, you really do have to break it down and share the responsibility. I'm going to talk to you specifically about safety and security elements of some of the stuff we're asking for. Tim Fearley, Director of Facilities, is going to give you a little bit more deeper status on those things. Clark White, and our Director of Maintenance, is going to talk infrastructure and energy management. Robert Frisbee, our technology, and then Tina Thorpe with our finance. I've already said the 15th largest school system, just to give you an idea of how large. I'll just run down those numbers real quick. Basically 22,000 students, almost 4,000 employees, 44 campus sites, property, just over 1,000 acres property. And then I always put in there, those are the big three when you start talking about infrastructure. Well over 200 acres when you talk about the paving and parking that we constantly have to put on there and address. And then over 100 acres when you're talking about that conditioned airspace with HVAC, and over 100 acres when you're talking about roofs, which are always something that we have to address. Looking at the high priority items, I just mentioned a few. I won't repeat myself on them other than just to bring you a little bit more focus on a couple of things that are just different from what I just said. That BDA, that bidirectional amplification, that we learned back in 9/11 when the fire and the police could not talk with each other. And that became such a high priority. That has been implemented now, and we're still working through those things, but it is already showing that it's a good thing to have. With that, the student vehicle, let me just that's the queuing and the separation on our campuses from the parking and the queue rider lines to keep us safe there, with kids not crossing up in those areas. I mentioned about the safety assessment between us and Asheville City. I'll put that up there. I said it kind of in advance. One of the big things you're going to see, two big things actually. Let me go ahead and move into that and see if my slide will help prompt my comments. This I just put up there just to kind of illustrate that very first one we hired in 2019. They finished in the middle of their assessment. They came out with tons of recommendations. If I had to remember that list, I bet there was anywhere from 30 to 35 where the recommendations were common through the schools. Some of them, like I say, common through all schools, but some of them very school specific based on the age the school was built. There was a slide that we put in here, and I think we've shared it with you before. We've got schools that were built as early as 1920 with Oakley Elementary. So schools have a lot of different needs from a safety and security standpoint. What other?
This has happened before.
Okay.
Is your screen up?
It's working on mine.
It's
Can we
happened.
share it?
Sure. Did you leave the room? Let me see, because it's happened before and we haven't figured out how to get it back.
While she's doing that, I'll ask a question from earlier. It was in, the map is one of the financials, and he said we've got about 54.3 million in projects, no debt. And that there were 11 from 2 cycles ago and 1 from 3 cycles ago that we haven't issued debt for. And so that, I was just curious what was going on with those projects that we've not been able to go issue the debt. And it didn't list the names of the projects on that side, it was just there.
They're Asheville High projects. And what we're doing is waiting on spending to happen. That's my hunch without tracking it. So what we're trying to do is pay ourselves back instead of pay ourselves forward. Would most likely be, we have a couple from, let's see, 23, 20. Could be, we haven't spent any money on the Asheville High storm water drainage, HVAC piping and abatement, and the main building water and sewer. We can do some of those.
Yeah, design hasn't wrapped up on either one of those yet.
Same as the other.
Stormwater drainage should be, because that was part of the track.
Still waiting on a permit.
We actually got that.
There is a, Commissioner Wells, there's a, there you go, project list. And what basically, to make it, just oversimplify it, if it has activity, I'm scooping it up. If it doesn't, I'm not.
And so I guess part of the question is in like the one from 3 years ago, do you know why we don't have activity?
Is that Lucy Kane?
That's what you said.
Is that what you're-
Oh, okay.
Okay, what you said, we're in the process now, okay.
For the second.
Yes,
Yeah, we've been done. That's already.
yes.
Very disappointed.
conversations.
So can I share this on Teams and then share it back on Zoom through Teams?
So the stream is looking good and my supervisor can come over, but, I'm not sure what he'd like to do. It is, streaming
It's sharing on,
on the YouTube. Yeah, everything is well, it's just this room.
let's see.
If you share it on Teams, it's not going to stream.
Okay.
And my coworker is just right next door, so she's
Okay.
coming over.
If I leave and come back, do you think that'll do it?
No, I think it's the console.
Okay.
It's not us because everything is well on that.
Actually works 50%.
Either does or doesn't. Appreciate you all being patient as we allow this for the general public, so.
Thank you.
Yeah. Commissioner Wells, we keep a list. Paige and I have a list of all the projects we haven't issued debt on. We can share that with you as well. We can ask why. Skipped ahead when we did the last debt issuance. Buncombe County Schools had some projects that they were further along on, so we got a little off cycle with those. Kind of shoved those into that issuance, but otherwise it would be a clean, you know, ideally it's like a clean 2 prior years projects and 2 prior years project debt. But that's just in the fake world. That's not in the real world, right? Yeah, so, that's the dream world, yes.
Any other questions? We're working on that. Now's your time. We have our finance brains here in the room.
We'll make sure that 110 gets added when we run the numbers.
Running down Ashland, as the Ashland High Auditorium project, that's right.
It's not, yeah, we're, see, I should get 100% construction documents, beginning of next month. And then we'll get that on the street bid, and current construction schedule is looking like January is when the best time to start. The school, I think's got a couple of functions in there that we're trying to work around.
Yeah. So if you all have handouts, you all have handouts. You all have handouts. That's a great idea. We'll just keep rocking. Because they can see it. You said the streamers can see it.
Thanks.
You get to go, oh yeah, you don't need that anymore. I'll try to follow them.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Whatever your curveball there, just let me know when you're ready.
This slide right here is the one we'll start on. All that was just to reiterate.
I was going to say, for those who listen, just describe it.
Yeah, there was a slide that right when it went down, it was just showing that in reference to the $400,000 from back in 2019 that both Ashland City and Buncombe County received. It just showed that in 2019, in that first block, that's when that occurred. And then once we got the results, we started prioritizing what we wanted to do from a safety and security standpoint, which basically ended TRC and what they did for us in 2020. And everything since then has been the implementation phase, which is the last block. And it is ongoing. And that was the last comment I think I made was because of those 30, 35, some common to all schools, some individual to some schools. that will be some time before we can get through them all, but we're making progress. That's the big thing on that slide. So going to the next slide, you'll actually see some pictures of some of what we're talking about. And I will tell you the two biggest ones that we're really just trying to gain ground as fast as possible. And it's good, the glass film that's being put on all the exterior of all the schools. I have to pause on this to tell you about tempered glass versus laminated glass. And if you see that picture, second one down, not the one that just shattered and staying in place, but the one that shattered and leaving a big hole. That's tempered glass. That's Sandy Hook's front entrance. So if you remember back, and actually there was another school, I'm trying to remember also just recently, same thing, shot the front glass, fell out, walked right in within seconds of firing that bullet. When you put the laminate over it, and a bullet might go through, but they're not just gonna walk in. They're gonna have to sit over there and beat at that glass. And we've actually got 3M is who we've worked with. They a good video. We didn't probably have time today, but if you ever want to look at Safety Glass 3M, pull that video up. He shoots and he gets frustrated. He bangs on it for about 1.5 minutes before he can bang a big enough hole in it and get in. What is the hope? The hope is there's sirens in the distance, and they abort the AC Rentals, and you went in the main door, you passed by 5 hallways and 1 common area before you ever get to the office. So that has been moved forward. That was obviously a bigger expense, but that's our goal. And not that all 45 schools, some of our newer schools, like Inca Intermediate, Cane Creek, some of the schools, were built more with that concept in mind. So 35 schools, I'd like to think, but here again, it'll be a few more years before we ever get to it. That's the slow approach that we're trying to take at it. And like I said, we're getting great responses from our schools, students, and parents. Parents see it, and parents are very appreciative of it. So just to give you a little background on that. I will tell you, I've been, Karen Fairley, Center for Safer Schools, Dr. Fairley, she came up and visited us, and I showed her these things. She was very impressed with what we've been able to accomplish along with Ashland City and through your efforts. She asked me to speak at the state safety conference, and I actually did a lot of this presentation with that. As soon as I finished that, I had emails upon emails, people asking for our products, how we were able to accomplish this. So, and I just have to give you the thanks for that and continue the commitment that you have with those monies. So I think that's pretty much it for me. I'm going to let Tim Fearley take a little bit deeper dive in our project status.
Yeah, I'm going to show you a quick run through of the types of projects we're doing. Most of them are complete or 95% complete. Took the pictures a couple of weeks ago, and there was a mad scramble before school started, so they're maybe a little further along than what the pictures show. But Pisgah Elementary is on one end of the county, and we've used our TRC prioritization to determine what schools to do next, because that could get to be a very political decision. That's one great value of having that third-party expert come in and help us prioritize projects. So Pisgah was completed, and it'll be hard to see. You didn't have a professional photographer here, but on that bottom one, you see the layer 1 on the left. That's that ballistic window with a very small pass-through. And on the right, you see that layer 2, that waiting room, if you will, that has a window that's kind of like a fast food window. It's intrusion resistant. It has laminated glass. And behind both of those windows, there's a pull-down metal screen so that if someone is concerned about folks being able to see in there, they can pull those screens down and have another layer of protection. Pisgah is 70 years old, a little over 70 years old. And then Reynolds High, we did the same thing as Mr. Huff said, that's over 40 years old. And most all our schools are very different. We have 3 projects at Reynolds High. The first one that you see here is, again, that lobby reconfiguration, and that upper left picture again shows the level 1 on the left and that waiting area level 2 on the right. We redid our track there. That's our last track to be done. We've kind of gone through them all. And just like Asheville City Schools, I mean, you go right down to the dirt. That's what, it's a very big investment, but if you don't have your subsoils and subgrade correct, your very expensive topping will fail in a short time. We also have tennis courts being redone, very similar process. They're about to be resurfaced next week or 2 weeks from now, Clark? 21st. North Buncombe Middle, we also have several projects over more than one period of this budget year, but we did a security addition which connects on that photo on the far right is on the left of that photo is the main building of the school, and popping up on the right is the gymnasium. And forever it's been open. So anyone coming along sees a trail of students all day long, back and forth. So we've hardened that connector between them, and we'll be done in about a month, I would say, that'll be ready for use. And we'll make that school much more secure. North Boca Middle was our only middle school without a softball field on campus. It's a very tight, we actually have quite a bit of property, but it's very sloped. So it was a fairly involved project. You can see a portion of the retaining wall and the step on the right, what it took, but we squeezed it in there, and we finished it in time for them to have the first playoff game last fall, which they won, and I think it's been a great success. And then roofing projects. We have a lot of low slope, no slope roofs, and we have some that are, they look like your house, asphalt shingles. We have been going to these metal retrofit roofs. So they're basically a 50-year minimum roof, whereas a low slope roof is 20 to 30 years. What it's also done that Clark will talk about is it gives us a great surface to put solar on. So if you have 30 years of solar, Clark, now we've got a 50-year roof minimum, and you can recoat it if it rusts. It's basically indefinite, but it's a big project. It's more costly than a low slope roof, but it's going to serve us well. We get more insulation out of it as well. It adds some curb appeal to some of those post-war schools are not the most attractive schools. And I think folks are pleased with the outcome once they get through construction. It's kind of painful during construction. Most projects are. Hopefully Elementary, this was one of our shingle roofs that had trusses, and shingles, you're lucky to get 20 years out of them. And on these huge roofs, expansion and contraction is difficult, whereas the metal roofs are, they can handle that easily, and it's a much less costly overlay. And again, we're going to get at least 50 years out of it. You'll see, I'll hint in the upper left, you see them, as soon as we got it done, Clark was right up there installing solar. Irwin High School has a couple of projects. This one is a security project. This stairwell that you see on your right and enclosed on your left was a vulnerability that TRC noted. You could go right up those stairs and right into the school. There was kind of two wings to the school. So therefore, the school had to keep those doors shut. And you basically had to post a staff member there all the time for students to move back and forth. So this fairly simple enclosure, it's open air, it breathes, but it makes that building secure. And now they don't have to lock those doors up top. Students can go back and forth in a normal day. And then that school has this monstrous window wall in the media center that is original to the building and was not designed to the wind loads that we get, and the gasketing, you know, the rubber gasketing becomes hard, and it leaked and it kind of bled. This black gasketing was not very energy efficient. The glass technology has improved. So that project is probably 50% complete now. They're starting to install glass. And the lower glass in that will all be laminated glass, so it will be intrusion resistant, whereas the upper glass will be tempered glass. And then this is kind of normal re-roofing, phase 3 of 4. We don't generally aren't able to do an entire school at once. We do it in phases where there's natural breaks. We've got one more phase left to do. We've done the worst phases. So we'll just keep pecking away at it. It's a low slope roof there. And with that, I will transition to Clark, who can talk about solar projects and infrastructure.
Tim was just describing our way we roof. We have well over 1,000 roof areas, and a roof area is a section of roof where it changes elevation. So we have, for both Tim and I career, have worked on the most needed roofs just because there's not enough money to go around. So we want to talk about the solar projects that technically were not funded with this committee, but it's, as we move forward, we have a combination of roof mounted solar systems and ground mounted systems that are currently underway. We have used all of our available metal roofs so far, and basically all of our available ground space so far. So we're going to have to, if we move forward, go to our low slope roofs to be able to install additional solar. So you'll see one of the requests in this year's budget is for funding to pay the extra cost basically for our roofing projects, because we are going to have to put a different type of roof on to handle the solar systems on our low slope roofs. But these are a few pictures. You got Cane Creek Metal, which is a ground mount system. And some people may ask, or I've had a lot of people ask, because that building does have a metal roof, and so does Hominy Valley, why did we not put solar on those roofs? The buildings are orientated incorrectly, and we had to put them on the ground because the solar systems would not generate on those roofs, which is kind of interesting. But as Tim said, Oakley Elementary, we just finished up North Buncombe Middle's roof, so they're starting out there, and we're trying to finish up. We currently have 13 solar projects underway. There's 2 of them are operational, North Windy Ridge and Owen Middle. The other ones are in some form or fashion trying to either get permits for stormwater or get tie-in to the electrical grid for through Duke Energy. So let's see if I can. This is a slide we show all the time to our own staff and wherever we get a chance, just kind of explaining how big Buncombe County is. And it talks about the life cycle of our, what I call just the infrastructure of our buildings, the things that you have to keep them operational. And it's a simple math project. It's, we have 50 chillers. They expect to last for 20 years. So if we don't spend over $500,000 a year on chillers, we are going backwards. That is just maintaining what we have. So that goes through all the different products in our buildings. It's not really everything, but big ticket items that that we look at every year in all of our budgets that we have, not only this budget, but our 4042 budget, lottery funds, and different grants and whatever's out there available to keep these rolling.
That is a serious investment in paving.
There it goes. Yeah, it is, and it's asphalt, carpet, flooring is expensive. If you look at a per square foot cost, flooring's a lot more expensive than asphalt, which is kind of weird. But so this is a 5-year reoccurring cost, and broken down into different sections. You've got ADA compliance. Those are just the needs that, to keep our buildings, all of our codes, requirements, the elevators we have, just our building in general, that goes into the systems that keep them operational, everything from technology needs to plumbing, sewer, HVAC, flooring, roofing. So you can see we need to be spending a little over $19 million a year just to maintain what we have. That's if we replace things at the end of their lifespan, we need to be spending that much annually. Let's see, now I am going to switch over to Mr. Frisbee. There you are.
So there won't be any pictures in the technology frame because we consider taking pictures of our network and showing the public as security issues. So I'm going to just run you through a brief history of our network and talk about some things that we have going on. In 2012, our Buncombe County School leadership decided that we were going to increase our digital footprint and move to a 1-1 initiative. So in 2013, we developed our first network operations center all of our switches, network, got all the schools connected. And two things I want you to remember about this as I go through this. Number one, that was 2013. Done. And number two, it cost $3.8 million. Okay, that's been 10 years ago. Now, last year, we requested $6.4 million from this commission to start to work on refreshing the equipment in our network operations center. We have used up until this date, 1.34 million of that. We are in the works right now to be able to start purchasing our network switches in the next few days. We currently have 990 switches across the district. We expect the cost of those 990 switches to be over $7 million. So we have currently about 5 million left from last year. And, we're going to try and get as many of those switches as we can with this money, and also looking at other funding for that. But these switches are 10 to 12 years old and have not been replaced. So this is very important to us. Not only is this gear aging, but it is very important for us for the success of our school system, along with the security piece that we now have that we're faced with. So that is the network connectivity piece in the server. Now let's talk about the network, firewall, and the wireless controller and backup redundancy. The most recent firewall that we purchased was purchased in 2016, and it cost $60,000. We are ready to purchase a new one and need to, and the cost of it is going to run above $120,000. We have, over time, we see at least 10 attempts per day from Asia and the Middle East to breach our network. So it's important that we try to put in place redundancy for our firewall and our wireless controller in case they were to have a breach. And there is no federal or state money that allows us to build redundancy. Because money that we get from federal and state, got to use it now, it's got to be this year's students. That's the purpose of it. So this money that we are getting from the commission allows us to build that redundancy. It allows us to have that equipment on hand in case something gets broke, and we have a breach that we can replace that. Now, last year, we were able to secure funding from the Safer Schools grant to build an airlock cybersecurity data vault, which now allows us to back up all of our data in our school system into a vault that can only be opened by 1 or 2 people. It runs about like a bank. It backs itself up when it wants to, how it wants to. We have no control over it. That way nobody's accessing. This was a big help to us with our cybersecurity insurance that we have now for us to be able to back up all of our data and have a plan for getting our system back up if we were to ever have a breach. Our other priority here are network security cameras and storage servers. We just completed the installation of 1,300 new security cameras with the use of just under $3.2 million from the Safer Schools grant. Now that we have those in place, there is new detection software and monitoring technology that we're going to be able to look into that requires a 1080p camera. So the cameras we had in the past wouldn't allow us to use that detection software to be able to use and have more security in our schools. Our next phase is going to be to include installing security cameras in strategic locations in order for us to increase monitoring of school driveways, cars coming in, going out, parking lots, athletic fields, and even some unmonitored locations in schools that haven't been included up to this point. Right now, the first initial piece that we've looked at would be adding about 500 cameras at a cost of about $1.2 million. And then the fourth bullet on this is the building intercoms, bell systems, and the phones and outdoor speakers. We currently have 10 school buildings that have intercoms that are end of life. In the past, and some of these were installed in the year 2000. That's getting harder to find replacement parts, equipment that we need to keep these systems going. We also have 10 additional schools that need to be upgraded to newer digital technologies to use the analog system that we have local plans for in place. But the problem there is the cost of replacing these intercom and bell systems has just increased substantially. Systems costing $30,000 and $40,000 3 years ago are now costing $70,000 to $90,000 per building, depending on the size of the school and the building. Also, all of Buncombe County schools are equipped with voice over IP phones, which means they're internet phones, work off the internet. Our vendor is Mitel, who bought ShoreTel a couple of years ago. Mitel has decided and announced that their roadmap is to retire all of their business systems by 2029. So in 2024, equipment purchases will cease, and we will be tasked with the process of replacing all of our office phones and local phones that are not in the classroom with new phones. Those phones range from $500 to $1,000 a piece. So that's going to be an estimate. We're going to come back to you down the road and say, you have to take care of this too. That'll be something in the future. Also, we've got lots of requests for outside intercoms, outside speakers, in case we have a security breach or a mayor or anything else that's on campus where everybody outside will be able to be reached with a intercom system. So we're looking at what that's going to look like. We have some concerns with noise ordinances because we get lots of complaints from the community that they're hearing the bells and the announcements during the day. So you take a speaker that you could hear from 2 miles away and put it outside on top of the building. We've got to have our homework done on making sure that we get those things taken care of. The biggest problem that we're running into with going back to the initial $6.4 million is the fluid nature of this market. We have instances where we've asked for quotes and couldn't get them because the product's not on the shelf because they're concerned in giving us a quote because the price is going to go up between the time that you ask for a quote and the time that they can deliver. Delivery times run months, if not a year, on a lot of this equipment. So those are a couple of things that we've been experiencing over the past year to get this initial money spent. So although we are requesting another $2 million for the infrastructure this year, we are still going to be looking at other funding sources and grants to keep this project running and try to phase these products in. It was a great thing back in 2012 that we decided to build this network. It was not a good thing that we built it in a year because everything's going to fail at the same time. And you can see based on these prices that we're not going to be able to fund the whole thing in 3 to 5 years, or maybe 6. So we're going to try to keep this older technology working as long as we can and replace it as the funding's available, depending on where the funding's coming. Ms. Thorne.
Okay. I want to thank my teammates for doing an awesome job. I feel like giving you historical information, showing you where we are with our current funding, and talking about our future needs and things that we've looked at as a team. We look at this through multiple lenses. We look at it through 4042. We look at it through Article 39. We look at it through lottery, but we always come together as a team doing a priority, prioritizing the list and trying to make sure where we can use what funds the best and most efficient way that we can in order to get these projects done in a timely manner, and also to meet, because we know we're trying very hard to always get our 75% completion so we can get them on the bond and trying to get things done, just staying in a working order. So the sheets that you originally have in the front show you that our high priority has 27 projects on that, and you may think that's enormous. But given our infrastructure and how large we are, we're asking for 31 million for those high priority projects that we really need in order to maintain and to keep up. And then our second sheet that you have is the second priorities, and there's 17 listed for 66 million. And we get that information through these teams of meeting, which involves a lot of outside stakeholders, principals, and knowing what we need coming down the road and looking at technology and where we're headed. So what we've done here at the very back of this presentation is actually sorted these in 3 different types. So this one is for school security and safety. And remember, we look at security and safety as 2 different definitions very clearly. So we have the safety and the security piece listed. And I'm not going to read them all to you, but that's the first type of priority that we sorted by. Then the ADA accessibility, we have 2 of those listed in this. Now, remember, we use other funds to do ADA and accessibility as well. But these are very large renovations, large dollars, and the other funds can't withstand those. So those are on this list. And then the third wave is the infrastructure, and you've seen lots of data in here about what it takes to keep our infrastructure up and running. And so this is the third way that we sorted these so that you can see our 27 high priority list. So I'd like to know if you all have any questions. I've got a wonderful team here that can also answer lots of things.
Okay, just a basic question. You had them sorted into those groups, but still, as far as the priority for you, it is to pick 1 through, okay.
Yes, 1 through 27 is the list of how we rank them.
Robert, I feel like I asked maybe the same thing last year, just because it gets overwhelming, because I feel like as the new technology continues to come out, it's almost like companies are making a money grab to make the next best thing. So within all of that, like how long, what we have now has lasted 10 years. And so our plan now would be to like do a slow phase, is that right?
Yeah, there's 2
But will
things.
that mean that there's different technology at different places, and how do we feel about that?
Yeah, that's one thing Jerry and his team have worked really hard on, is trying to future-proof these decisions. For example, a switch may come out to where each port in that switch supports 30 watts. Well, the technology in 5 years may have to have 60. So we look at those type of things to say, can we get this 60-watt switch instead of a 30? And is that 60-watt switch going to last us at least 10 to 12 years? So those are the things that we're looking at as we negotiate. One of the other things we'll find too is like buying a car. You go to the car lot, the salesman wants to sell you that car on the lot, but you may not want that car on the lot. You want something specific to your needs. And we are finding that out to be the case a lot. We'll go and say, we're going to quote for this, but then we get what they have and what they want us to have as opposed to what we want. And to try to future-proof it as much as possible where it's going to last as long as we can make money.
Do you feel like that part of this supply chain issue is still stemming from what happened during COVID? It's gonna,
Yes.
it is, so you do think that that's gonna continue to get better and better? Okay.
Yeah, we were given, we've ordered our new access points, wireless access points. We needed a couple more, 364-day delivery. They won't go to a year because it looks bad on their statistics, but it's 364 days.
And then my only other question, which really is, it's a future thing, with regard to Glen Arden, what does it cost to build a new school? I'm just curious. If it's $25 million to remodel a school.
It's about the same. We actually, when we did that study, we looked at it both ways. What if we started fresh
Yeah,
versus the renovations? And it wouldn't be a whole new school because the gymnasium and auditorium are kind of a standalone and could be easily renovated, but it's surprisingly close, the cost of that. Now, that was
would there
3
be,
years ago.
because, well, I'm assuming, I mean, I get like the disclosure every year at the beginning of the year. There's asbestos in that school, if I'm correct?
Correct.
I'm pretty sure I get that disclosure, and so would that cause an issue? Like, how does that work? Is that like a big extra cost?
No, it is an extra
either
cost.
Renovating or tearing down?
It's a logistic, either way, the asbestos has to go.
Right,
But it's a logistical issue. You don't want kids in
oh,
there,
no.
staff in there when you do that. And it becomes a logistical planning issue and a time frame. If it stretches the project out, there's a cost associated with a longer project, and there is a disruption of school activities. So once we get to that point, I think that will be a big discussion. We'll have to update that. It's in future right now.
It is, yeah.
We'll need to update that and really seriously look at the logistics of what it's going to take to do both. And we don't have a spare school around that we can just move kids to.
Well,
So
no,
how
if
do
you
you-
build a new school, or you'd have to build it on the same footprint.
That's what we looked at. And that is fortunately one of the campuses that does have significant property.
Yeah.
So it is feasible to do on that site. So that helps in cost savings as well.
Speak more to the number 7, the progressive education program. It looks like additions and innovations due to increased membership.
Yeah, so the progressive education program is special needs students that are housed separately. They're not really, they're in a school, but they're housed within that school separately and not quite as mainstreamed as other schools. And their program typically is very intensive, requires a lot of equipment and space, and the teacher to student ratio is high. And we've simply seen a big increase in, that's the elementary portion of the program. At Estes, we have a middle school program at Valley Springs, and the high school program is at TC. And the elementary, well, there's two sides of it. Estes Elementary is growing. You know, it's just grown, like they're out of space in the school. So we can't really steal space from the school to accommodate the PEP students. And so we've looked at an addition to accommodate those students that would not impose on the elementary school.
Here, we mentioned that the Glen Arden along with WD, they're still the open concept schools.
Yeah.
The classrooms, there's classrooms in areas where I use Hawk Creek for an example. Hawk Creek, we did a big renovation, but you might have a pod area. There is no way for those kids to go into a full lockdown and lock their classroom. They're divided just by bookshelves. And it's a very old concept. So Hawk Creek was able, in the construction we did there, remodeling, they can lock themselves in their classrooms now. We have 2 schools out of 45 remaining. This school is one of them that still has open concept areas. In the way we mitigate that right now is we have designated areas they have to leave those classrooms and go somewhere where they can be locked down. But obviously, you'd rather stay and just lock your door.
So the 2 that you said are open concept.
The last two for the 45 are this one, Glen Arden and W.D. Williams.
Estes was built as an open concept, but over time, we really closed it in so you wouldn't know that going in there.
And I'll just mention, on the PEP question, the reference was made to Estes' growing population. Today is day 10 of our school year. Comparing to day 10 of last school year, Estes is up 50 students. So we've gained 50 students at one school, and that's the school where our PEP program, our elementary program is housed.
I'm curious about at Road Buncombe Elementary, am I confusing Road Buncombe with Brookville Elementary? Those are two first ones. Okay, I was just thinking about like the second drive, thinking about right there on Main Street. Okay.
On 21, what are those, the Federal Pacific panels replacement?
The Federal, number 21.
So Federal Pacific panels are, it's like a breaker panel in your house, they're just bigger. The problem with them, they won't trip. There's a problem, they will not trip like they're supposed to. So we have been working on getting those out of our building wherever we can. That's the main problem with those panels.
So they won't trip with hazards.
Now, something's going to give.
Yeah.
Re-roofing on 23 and 24, Blackmount Elementary and Blue Mountain Elementary, it doesn't say anything about re-roofing for solar, where over on, I just saw that. It's specific, there's another one over on the first page that says specifically for solar.
We just
So
put
will
extra-
those two not be re-roofed for solar?
Now, it would be to add an accommodation to those roofs, like if we put a curb, which is a raised portion of the roof, that we could put the solar panels on. So it's kind of an additional cost to the normal roofing program. But what that would do is make search for leaks easier. When you put solar on a roof and you have a leak, that is right on your roof, the owner is responsible, even if it's under warranty, the owner is responsible to remove all that solar. So you can imagine the cost. We can't afford to do that. So the concept is to do a 30-year roof. Typically, we do a 20-year warranty, but kind of do a 30-year roof and add these roof curbs to provide separation between the solar system and our roofs.
We're also meeting with Jeremiah in the coming weeks. I think there's got to be a concerted effort to a good long-term plan for this, for all of us, because it's the way we have roofed historically will no longer work. So, because it's not a large enough space to make the solar financially feasible for the county. So I think that's the conversation that we're going to start in the coming weeks, and I think it will lead into Dog Shore.
I have one more question. Help me understand why stadium lighting is a legal compliance issue.
So the High School Athletic Association has minimum requirements for the foot candles illumination on the playing field, depending on what sport it is. And if you don't meet those foot candle requirements, obviously it's dangerous. Another thing that cause a big problem, if they make the playoffs, then they cannot play on their field if they don't meet the lighting requirements. So those are and it takes more light than you realize.
Will those be LED?
They will be LED, yes. And they actually, we have to, something that High School Athletic Association started, I think it's 2 years ago, maybe. I could be wrong. You now have to inspect your fields annually and send them a affidavit document, basically, that your fields or your arenas are performing to these levels.
That makes me think about that sticky wicket of lottery funds. And it's probably an impossible answer right now, but maybe for next time. I'm curious for both districts, what kind of resources you've looked at beyond just this commission, like in terms of lottery funds for something
So
like.
we're doing our stadium lights at the softball field right now with lottery fund at one of our high schools. Doing a ton of paving with lottery funds. There are, I think that's all right, second, I don't know off the top of my head, but we're looking at a security project that we're going to be starting fairly soon that will probably, portion of it, maybe lottery funds. So we're definitely emptying out every bucket we have.
No, that's great. And I'm going to be that guy and just, sitting on this commission, I would love to see those figures. So that if somebody outside of this room asks me, I can be able to say, I know Buncombe County or Asheville City are putting, they are getting line funds. As someone who sits on the school board, I get questions from my constituents all the time, like, why can't you use lottery funds for whatever, right? So that would be really helpful for me to see that, to say Buncombe County spent X amount of lottery funds.
We can pull that because they have to run it through our commission.
Okay.
The application goes to us and then the state and back to us, so we have all the budget numbers.
That'd be great.
We'll pull that.
And all the projects are listed under the lottery website. Everything's listed and how much is contributed to each school system. It's all loaded.
What about the public school capital needs funds? Is that a good one? What about that one? Are you guys using that one?
We don't qualify for the needs one.
Okay. I'm sorry, one more question. I'm just curious. On number 9, are buses getting bigger?
Yeah, they are.
Are they?
Oh,
Thanks,
the
so-
size of
Yeah.
them? Yes.
And we've got a 1950s building with, we've actually had to cut out the header and raise the header on a couple of the doors so they would have a few spaces for those taller
Yeah.
buses. They're also longer.
They're not fitting.
The space for the mechanics to work between them. If you have 2 guys trying to change a tire, you're elbow to elbow doing it. It's not a safe condition. We need to address that.
It's definitely a good thing, bad thing, good thing because you can put more students.
Sure, yeah,
on a bus.
right, yeah.
But the other thing, it does, like I said, when you have older buildings, you gotta keep that back door up, sometimes to work on the
Yeah,
bus.
right, yeah.
And during the cold months, I mean, that's very difficult to do. The other thing too is it's caused us, in a lot of cases, to orientate our buses because some of the big ones have tough times turning on different routes. We've got to go with the shorter buses there, because bigger buses.
Sure, right.
So, yeah, it's a good thing to get more kids on the bus, but it's caused some other things, second and third order effects that we got to deal with.
We also service Asheville City buses as well.
Sure, right.
So that's full county buses.
Benefits both.
Any other questions? Well, thank you all so much, and I do appreciate you also doing the infrastructure, the audio recurring costs, just to kind of give us that perspective. This has all been very valuable information, so thanks to both teams for everything you provided us today. And of course, thanks to our staff for pulling this all together and all the hard work that you put into this. Was there anything else that
No, I think we'll put our heads together and try to make sure the projections are as good as we think they can be. And if you wouldn't mind reviewing the link that I sent last Wednesday, and I can resend it. And it is just the way that we presented the financial information last year. If you all would like a different way to see the information, you can try to distill it down as much as possible.
I'll look at it, it will find me, but if anybody else has any input, please send that to Matt. Okay. All right, thank you very much. And if no further questions, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.